Little girl saved in alley. Upon hearing 2 words, teacher calls 911 in panic. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain fell in sheets across the city that Thursday afternoon, turning the world into a blur of gray. Miss Laney hurried along the sidewalk, one hand clutching her umbrella while the other held her teacher's bag close to her chest. She'd stayed late grading papers, and now dark clouds had rolled in, bringing an early twilight to the streets. Just 2 more blocks, she whispered to herself, stepping around a puddle. At 34, Caroline Laney had been teaching 2nd grade for nearly a decade. Her students adored her gentle manner, and the way she made even multiplication tables seem like an adventure. A sudden gust of wind turned her umbrella inside out, sending cold raindrops down her neck. As she struggled to right it, a sound cut through the drumming of rain on pavement, faint but unmistakable. A child's whimper. Miss Laney froze, tilting her head to listen. There it was again, coming from the narrow alley between a corner store and an apartment building. She hesitated only briefly before stepping toward the sound. "Hello, is someone there?" she called, peering into the shadows. At first she saw nothing, then a small movement caught her eye, a flutter of fabric against brick. Squinting, Miss Laney made out the hunched figure of a little girl pressed against the wall, partially hidden behind a dumpster. She wore a once pretty blue dress, now soaked and mud-splattered. "Oh my goodness," Miss Laney gasped, rushing forward. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" The child looked up with wide, frightened eyes that seemed too large for her pale face. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. What struck Miss Laney most wasn't just the fear in those eyes, but the girl's swollen belly, distended in a way that seemed dangerously unnatural for such a thin child. "I'm a teacher," Miss Laney said softly, crouching down despite the puddles. "My name is Miss Laney. Can you tell me yours?" The little girl trembled, clutching her stomach with one hand. On her wrist, Miss Laney noticed a homemade friendship bracelet, frayed and missing 2 beads. "Nora," came the whispered reply. "Nora, that's a beautiful name. Where's your family? How did you get here? The child's..." The lower lip quivered. "She's gone," Nora whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Who's gone, sweetheart?" Nora just shook her head, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. Miss Laney gently touched the girl's forehead. It was burning hot despite the cool rain. Something was very wrong. With careful movements, she slipped off her cardigan and wrapped it around the shivering child. "I'm going to call for help, okay? We need to get you somewhere warm and dry." As she reached for her phone, Nora suddenly grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "They won't find her," the little girl said with unexpected clarity. "Willow's hiding. She told me to wait, but she didn't come back." "Willow? Is that your sister?" Miss Laney asked, her concern deepening. Nora nodded once before her eyes fluttered closed, her small body going limp. Heart racing, Miss Laney dialed 911, cradling the child close to shield her from the rain. As she gave the dispatcher their location, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stumbled into something far more complex than a lost child. She looked down at Nora's unconscious face, at the broken bracelet on her tiny wrist, and made a silent promise. "I'll help you find her." In the distance, sirens began to wail, their sound cutting through the steady drumbeat of rain. The emergency room buzzed with activity as doctors rushed to attend to little Nora. Miss Laney paced the waiting area, her clothes still damp from the rain, unable to shake the image of the child's frightened eyes from her mind. "Miss Laney?" A doctor in blue scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Bennett. You brought in the young girl." "Yes," she nodded eagerly. "How is she? Is Nora going to be all right?" Dr. Bennett gestured toward the, chairs. "Let's sit down. First, we've contacted Child Services who are trying to locate any family. In the meantime, can you tell me exactly how you found her?" Miss Laney recounted discovering Nora in the alley, the girl's mysterious words about someone being gone, and mentioned the name. "Willow? that the child had spoken before losing consciousness. "What's wrong with her?" Miss Laney asked when she finished. Her stomach seemed so swollen. "That's what concerns us," Dr. Bennett explained carefully. "It's not an injury or infection as we initially suspected. The swelling appears to be from malnutrition and fluid retention. Has she been treated for any medical conditions that you know of?" "I don't know anything about her," Miss Laney admitted. "I just found her there in the rain." A social worker joined them, introducing herself as Ms. Rivera. "We're trying to piece together who this child is. No missing persons report matches her description. It's as if she appeared from nowhere." "May I see her?" Miss Laney asked. They led her to a small room where Nora lay sleeping, an IV drip attached to her arm, her color slightly improved. The hospital gown made her look even smaller than she had in the alley. As if sensing her presence, Nora's eyes fluttered open. Recognition flickered across her face when she saw Miss Laney. "Hello again," Miss Laney said gently, sitting beside the bed. "You're safe now." Nora's gaze darted nervously around the room before settling back on Miss Laney. "Is this where the doctors live?" she whispered. The innocent question broke Miss Laney's heart. "This is a hospital. The doctors work here to help people feel better." Nora seemed to consider this information carefully before speaking again. "She bats 3 times before opening," she said suddenly, her voice taking on an almost sing-song quality. "Who does, sweetheart?" "The lady. 3 knocks means it's safe to come out." Nora's fingers worried at the frayed friendship bracelet. "The music box only plays when we're good." Miss Laney exchanged glances with Ms. Rivera, who had been taking notes. "Nora," Miss Laney tried again, "can you tell us about Willow? Is she your sister?" The little girl's eyes widened. "You know Willow?" For a moment, hope brightened her face before fading. "She protects me. She said to wait by the blue door, but I got scared when the rain came." "And who takes care of you and Willow?" Ms. Rivera asked gently. Nora's expression closed immediately. She turned her face to the wall. "It's okay," Miss Laney soothed. "You don't have to talk about anything that scares you." A nurse entered with a tray of food, simple broth, applesauce, and juice. Nora looked at it with a mixture of longing and fear. "Are you hungry?" Miss Laney asked. Nora nodded slightly but didn't reach for the food. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Making noise while eating isn't allowed," she whispered, so softly they almost missed it. Something cold settled in Miss Laney's stomach. She pushed the tray closer. "It's okay to make noise here, I promise." As Nora hesitantly reached for the spoon, Miss Laney noticed something clutched in her other hand, a folded piece of paper. When the child eventually drifted back to sleep, it fell onto the blanket. Miss Laney carefully unfolded it to find a crayon drawing, a stick figure behind what looked like bars, with oversized, frightened eyes that seemed to stare directly outward. Miss Laney couldn't explain why, but looking at those drawn eyes sent a chill down her spine, as if they were trying desperately to tell her something. By morning, Nora's condition had stabilized enough that the doctors allowed her to sit up in bed. Miss Laney arrived early, bringing a small stuffed rabbit she'd purchased in the hospital gift shop. "I thought you might like some company," she said, offering the toy to Nora. The little girl's eyes widened with wonder as she tentatively reached for the rabbit. She held it carefully, as if afraid it might disappear, then brought it close to her chest in a gentle hug. "Thank you," she whispered, a small smile flickering across her face. The first Miss Laney had seen. Detective Morgan arrived soon after, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun. She sat beside the bed while Ms. Rivera, the social worker, stood nearby taking notes. "Nora," Detective Morgan began gently, "we need your help to find your sister Willow. Can you tell us where you were living before yesterday?" Nora's fingers tightened around the stuffed rabbit. "With Aunt Pam," she said, her voice small. "And is Aunt Pam your mommy's sister or your daddy's sister?" the detective asked. Nora looked confused. "She's just Aunt Pam. She takes care of us." "'Cause," her voice trailed off, uncertainty clouding her expression. "That's okay," Detective Morgan reassured her. "Do you remember your address, where your house is?" "The blue house with the broken step," Nora replied. "You have to jump over it or it makes a noise." Detective Morgan nodded. Encouragingly, "That's very helpful. And was Willow with you at the blue house before you got separated?" At the mention of her sister, Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Willow is 13. She has the other beads," she said, touching her bracelet. "She made this for me for my birthday. She said as long as I wear it, she can always find me." "When did you last see Willow?" the detective pressed gently. "When the men came," Nora whispered. "Willow told me to hide in the special place and not come out until she came back. But she didn't come back." Miss Laney noticed how the detective's expression remained carefully neutral despite the alarming information. "What men, Nora? Do you know who they were?" The little girl shook her head. "Willow said they were playing a bad game. She pushed me into the hiding spot and closed the door. I heard lots of noise, then it got quiet. A nurse, eh?" entered with Nora's breakfast tray, temporarily halting the questions. The child stared at the food without reaching for it. "It's okay to eat," Miss Laney encouraged. "Willow always checked it first," Nora said softly. Understanding dawned on Miss Laney. "Would you like me to check it for you?" she asked. Nora nodded, relief evident in her eyes. Miss Laney made a show of examining the toast and scrambled eggs before declaring them safe. Only then did Nora begin to eat, taking small, careful bites. While the girl ate, Detective Morgan stepped outside with Ms. Rivera. Miss Laney followed, concerned about what they might be discussing. "We've identified a woman named Pamela Norris who matches the description," Detective Morgan explained quietly. "She's been reported for suspicious behavior before, but nothing was ever substantiated. The troubling part is she's not related to any children according to our records." "What about the sister?" Miss Laney asked. "We're looking, but there's no record of either girl in the system. It's as if they've been invisible." When they returned to the room, a nurse was helping Nora draw with crayons. The child handed a new picture to Miss Laney, this one showing two stick figures holding hands, one much taller than the other, standing beside what looked like a box with a tiny door. "That's me and Willow," Nora explained. "And that's the hiding place. Willow said if bad things happen, I should always hide there." Miss Laney felt a chill despite the warm hospital room. As she studied the drawing, she couldn't help wondering, if Nora had been hiding, what had happened to Willow? And who was this Aunt Pam, who had disappeared the same day Nora was found alone in the rain? The stuffed rabbit sat propped against Nora's pillow, its glass eyes seeming to reflect the same question that was forming in Miss Laney's mind. Where was Willow now? Miss Laney couldn't focus on her lesson plans that evening. Images of Nora's drawings and her haunting words about her missing sister kept intruding into her thoughts. After an hour of staring blankly at her computer screen, she closed her laptop and reached for her phone. "Detective Morgan? This is Caroline Laney. I was wondering if there's been any progress finding Willow or this Pam woman." The detective's sigh told her everything before she even spoke. "Nothing concrete yet. We've located a house matching Nora's description, blue with a broken step, but it was empty. Neighbors said the occupants moved out suddenly yesterday morning. The same day I found Nora," Miss Laney noted. "Exactly. We're treating it as suspicious, but without more information, we're somewhat limited in what we can do." After hanging up, Miss Laney made a decision that surprised even herself. She grabbed her car keys and headed out. 20 minutes later, she parked across from a small blue house with peeling paint and a sagging front porch. The second step was indeed broken, splintered, down the middle. Yellow police tape cordoned off the property, but neighbors watched curiously from their yards and windows. Miss Laney approached an elderly woman watering plants on the adjacent porch. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm inquiring about the family that lived here, particularly about two girls. One around 6 and another about 13. The woman lowered her watering can. "Those poor children, never allowed to play outside like normal kids. The little one always looked so hungry. Breaks your heart. Did you ever speak with them? Miss Laney pressed. The woman, Pam, she called. Herself, kept them on a tight leash. Hardly ever saw the older girl these past few months. The few times I tried to be neighborly, Pam hustled those children inside quick as lightning. She leaned closer. Between you and me, something wasn't right in that house. I called social services twice, but they said without evidence of wrongdoing, there was nothing they could do. Miss Laney's heart sank. The system failed them, she murmured. Are you with the police? The woman asked. No, I'm a teacher. I found the younger girl yesterday. The woman's eyes widened. Is she all right? What about the older one? Nora's recovering in the hospital. Willow is still missing. A middle-aged man approached from the house on the other side. I couldn't help overhearing. I've got security cameras on my garage. Might have caught something yesterday morning when all the commotion happened. Hope surged in Miss Laney's chest. Have you told the police? Called the non-emergency line, but they haven't sent anyone yet. Want to see the footage? Minutes later, Miss Laney was watching grainy video on the man's computer screen. The timestamp showed 6:42 a.m. just after sunrise. A car pulled up to the blue house, and two men got out. They entered without knocking. 15 minutes later, they emerged with what appeared to be a struggling figure between them. That's Willow, Miss Laney gasped, recognizing the girl's slim frame and long hair even in the poor quality video. There's more, the neighbor said, fast-forwarding slightly. At 7:03 a.m., a woman hurried out carrying suitcases, looking nervously over her shoulder. She drove away in a different car than the men had used. That must be Pam, Miss Laney said. May I have a copy of this footage for Detective Morgan? Back in her car, Miss Laney called the detective immediately. I have evidence of Willow being taken, she explained urgently, and the neighbor mentioned calling social services before with concerns. Miss Laney, Detective Morgan's voice turned stern. While I appreciate your commitment, you cannot conduct your own investigation. It could compromise our case and potentially put yourself in danger. But the system has already failed these girls once, Miss Laney protested. I can't just sit back and do nothing. After a moment of silence, the detective's tone softened. Bring the footage to the station. And from now on, any information you learn comes directly to me. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Miss Laney agreed, already starting her car. As she drove to the police station, her mind raced with questions. Who were those men? Why take Willow but not Nora? And most puzzling, why had this aunt, Pam, fled, leaving a sick child alone in the rain? The broken step of the blue house kept appearing in her mind's eye, a symbolic crack in the foundation of whatever story Pam had created for these children. Miss Laney was determined to find the truth hiding beneath that broken step, no matter what. For Willow's sake, for Nora's sake. The security footage changed everything. Detective Morgan assembled a small task force dedicated to finding Willow, and Miss Laney found herself included in their morning briefing, an unusual step that spoke to the urgency of the case. We've identified the vehicle used by the two men, Detective Morgan explained, pointing to an enhanced image on the station's bulletin board. It's registered to a cleaning service called Spotless Solutions, but when we contacted them, they claimed no knowledge of any employees visiting that address. What about Pam? Miss Laney asked. Pamela Norris appears to be using a false identity. The social security number she provided on rental applications doesn't exist, and her references all lead to disconnected phone numbers. A young officer raised his hand. We've checked missing persons reports going back. 5 years for girls matching Nora and Willow's descriptions. Nothing. It's like they were ghosts. Miss Laney frowned. They can't be ghosts. They're real children with real lives. We're just missing something. After the meeting, Miss Laney headed to the hospital to visit Nora. The little girl was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks, carefully arranging a set of plastic animals a nurse had brought her. The zebra likes to stand by the elephant. Nora explained seriously as Miss Laney entered. "They're friends." "That's a good arrangement," Miss Laney agreed, sitting beside the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "My tummy doesn't hurt so much," Nora said. "Dr. Bennett says I'm getting stronger." "That's wonderful news." Nora lined up her animals in a neat row. "Is Willow coming today?" The innocent question pierced Miss Laney's heart. "Not today, sweetheart, but a lot of people are looking for her." Nora's face fell. "She promised she'd come back." "Can you tell me more about Willow? What's she like?" The child's expression brightened. "She's the bravest person ever. She knows how to make macaroni and she helps me with my math. She tells the best bedtime stories." Nora touched her bracelet. "She made this for me. She has one too, but hers has the blue beads that are missing from mine." "And what about Aunt Pam? Was she nice to you?" Nora's hand stilled over her toys. "Sometimes, when we were good. She said we were lucky she took us in when nobody wanted us." "Nobody wanted you?" Miss Laney repeated gently. "After Mom went to heaven," Nora whispered, "Aunt Pam said the people who take care of kids didn't want us because we were too much trouble, but she would keep us if we followed all the rules." Miss Laney carefully controlled her expression despite the anger building inside her. "Do you remember your mom's name?" "Elizabeth," Nora said promptly, "like the queen in my storybook." This was new information, something concrete they could use to search records. As they talked, a man appeared in the doorway, tall with kind eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Jenkins," Miss Laney exclaimed, recognizing a substitute teacher from her school. "Miss Laney," he nodded, seeming surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Are you visiting someone?" she asked. "Actually, I volunteer reading to the children on this floor." His eyes drifted to Nora. "Hello there." Nora shrank back slightly, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "This is Nora," Miss Laney introduced her. "She enjoys stories, don't you, Nora?" The child nodded hesitantly. Mr. Jenkins smiled. "Well, I have some excellent books with me today. Perhaps I could read one for you?" As he settled into a chair and began reading a story about a lost penguin finding its way home, Miss Laney noticed how he kept glancing at Nora with an odd expression. When the story ended, and Nora was distracted by her toys again, Mr. Jenkins pulled Miss Laney aside. "That little girl," he whispered. "She looks so familiar." "You've seen her before?" Miss Laney asked, pulse quickening. "Not her, the sister." He frowned, trying to recall. "Last fall, I substituted for a middle school English class. There was a girl, quiet, always watching the door. Willow, I think her name was. She stayed after class one day, started to tell me something about her home situation, seemed frightened. Before she could explain, a woman arrived to pick her up early. The girl never returned to school after that." Miss Laney's eyes widened. "Mr. Jenkins, would you be willing to tell Detective Morgan about this?" He nodded solemnly. "Of course, something wasn't right about that situation. I reported it to the school counselor, but I never heard what came of it." As they exchanged contact information, Miss Laney glanced back at Nora, who was whispering secrets to her stuffed rabbit. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, but the picture it was forming sent a chill through her heart. The following morning arrived with gentle sunshine streaming through the hospital blinds. Miss Laney had spent the night researching Elizabeth and possible connections to Nora. And Willow, finding nothing concrete yet. She'd barely slept but still arrived at the hospital with fresh determination and a small paper bag. "Good morning, sunshine," she greeted Nora, who was watching cartoons with half interest. The little girl's face brightened immediately. "Miss Laney, you came back." "Of course I did. I promised, didn't I?" She set the paper bag on the bedside table. "I brought something special for breakfast." Nora eyed the bag curiously. "What is it?" Miss Laney pulled out a container of homemade oatmeal with cinnamon and apple pieces and a small jar of honey. "When I was a little girl and felt sick, my grandmother would make this for me. It always made me feel better. Dr. Bennett arrived for morning rounds as Miss Laney was setting up the breakfast. "Well, this looks much more appealing than our hospital oatmeal," he commented with a smile. "How is our patient doing today?" Miss Laney asked. "Much better. The fluid retention is improving and her blood work shows progress." He turned to Nora. "You're getting stronger every day, young lady." Nora ducked her head shyly at the praise. After the doctor left, Miss Laney spooned some oatmeal into a bowl and drizzled honey on top. She handed it to Nora, who took it but didn't eat. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Don't you like oatmeal?" Nora stared at the bowl. "Willow always gave me the first bite," she whispered. "She said it was to make sure it was good." Miss Laney felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Would you like me to have the first bite instead?" Nora nodded, relief washing over her face. Miss Laney took a small spoonful, made a show of tasting it, then smiled. "Delicious and perfectly safe. Your turn now." Only then did Nora begin to eat, slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. "It's yummy," she declared, a small smile playing on her lips. "Would you like to tell me about a happy memory with Willow while you eat?" Miss Laney suggested. Nora thought for a moment, spoon hovering mid-air. "Once, when Aunt Pam was away, Willow made us a fort with all the blankets. We pretended we were explorers discovering a new planet." Her eyes sparkled at the memory. "Willow used a flashlight to make shadow animals on the wall and told me stories about each one." "She sounds like an amazing sister," Miss Laney said. "The best," Nora agreed, scraping the last bits of oatmeal from her bowl. "She taught me how to tie my shoes and whistle through a blade of grass, and she never, ever broke a promise." The conviction in the child's voice was heartbreaking. Willow had promised to come back, and Nora still believed she would. After breakfast, a physical therapist arrived to help Nora take a short walk around the floor, part of her recovery plan. Miss Laney watched proudly as the little girl took tentative steps, growing more confident with each one. "Look at me, Miss Laney. I'm getting stronger for when Willow comes," she called out. "You certainly are," Miss Laney encouraged. When they returned to the room, Ms. Rivera was waiting with news. "We've found something interesting," the social worker said quietly to Miss Laney, while Nora was distracted by a puzzle. "There was an Elizabeth Miller who passed away from cancer 2 years ago. She had 2 daughters who were temporarily placed with a cousin named Patricia Miller." "Patricia, Pam," Miss Laney whispered. "Exactly. But here's where it gets strange. The paperwork for permanent guardianship was supposedly completed, but it's missing from the system. And Patricia Miller's address in the, records is for an empty lot. So someone manipulated the system," Miss Laney concluded. "Or knew how to exploit its weaknesses," Ms. Rivera agreed grimly. "The girls effectively disappeared from official oversight." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash from the hallway. A food cart had overturned. The sudden noise sent Nora diving under her bed, her small body trembling uncontrollably. "Nora!" Miss Laney knelt beside the bed, peering underneath. "Sweetheart, it's okay. Just a little accident in the hallway." But Nora had curled into a tight ball, eyes squeezed shut, hands over. Her ears. "Don't let them find me," she whispered. "Willow said stay hidden when there's loud noises." Miss Laney's heart broke at the child's terror. "No one's going to hurt you here, Nora. You're safe. I promise." Slowly, gently, she coaxed the little girl out from under the bed. When Nora finally emerged, she launched herself into Miss Laney's arms, clinging desperately. "I've got you," Miss Laney soothed, stroking her hair. "I've got you." Over the child's shoulder, she met Ms. Rivera's troubled gaze. The social worker's expression mirrored her own thoughts. What had these girls endured that would cause such a profound fear response? Later, when Nora had calmed and was napping with her stuffed rabbit clutched tight, Detective Morgan called with an update. "We've identified the men from the security footage," she said without preamble. "Both have records for petty crimes. Mainly debt collection with questionable methods. We're tracking them down now." "Debt collection?" Miss Laney frowned. What does that have to do with taking Willow? I don't know yet, the detective admitted. But we're getting closer. Oh, and Miss Laney, the principal called. He's concerned about your continued absence. Miss Laney glanced at Nora's sleeping form. Tell him I'll need more time. He mentioned something about unpaid leave and replacement teachers. I don't care, Miss Laney said firmly. I'm not abandoning her, not when we're so close to finding answers. As she hung, she noticed Nora was awake, watching her with those solemn eyes. Are you in trouble because of me? The little girl asked. Miss Laney smiled reassuringly. Not at all. Some things are more important than work, and helping you is one of those things. Nora considered this, then held out her bracelet-adorned wrist. Willow says this means we're connected forever. She touched the space where the missing beads should be. Maybe you need one too. The gesture, so simple and profound, brought tears to Miss Laney's eyes. I would be honored, she whispered. For the first time since this journey began, Miss Laney realized she was no longer helping Nora simply because it was the right thing to do. Somewhere along the way, this brave little girl had worked her way into her heart, and she would move heaven and earth to reunite her with her sister. The police station hummed with activity as Miss Laney followed Detective Morgan through the bullpen. Officers hunched over computers, phones rang incessantly, and the air smelled of coffee and determination. We've brought in one of the men from the video, Detective Morgan explained, leading her to a small observation room. James Farley, small-time enforcer for a loan shark operation. His partner is still at large. Through the one-way glass, Miss Laney could see a wiry man with a patchy beard slumped in a metal chair. He looked more defeated than dangerous. Has he said anything about Willow? Claims he doesn't know. Any girl by that name. Says he and his partner were just sent to collect a debt from Pamela Norris, or Patricia Miller, or whatever her real name is. The story doesn't add up. Miss Laney frowned. Can I watch the interrogation? Detective Morgan hesitated, then nodded. Stay quiet and remember this. Is unusual procedure. I'm only allowing it because of your unique connection to the case. Inside the interrogation room, a male detective was questioning Farley. Let's go through it again, he said, voice level but firm. You and Dunn went to the Blue House to collect money. Then what? Farley sighed. Like I said, we knocked. No answer. Door was unlocked, so we went in. Place was half packed up like someone was moving out. We started looking around, and this teenager jumps out screaming about leaving her sister alone. Miss Laney's breath caught. Willow. We told her we just wanted the money Pam owed, but the kid went crazy, throwing things, saying we'd never find her. We figured she meant Pam. So you took the girl? The detective pressed. Farley shifted uncomfortably. Dunn grabbed her to calm her down. She bit him, so he got rough. He stopped, seeming to realize his mistake. He restrained her. We thought she might know where Pam was hiding, so we took her with us to ask some questions. But she didn't know anything useful. Where is she now? I don't know. Dunn was supposed to drop her somewhere safe after we questioned her. That's the last I saw of either of them. The detective slammed his hand on the table, making Farley jump. You expect us to believe you just lost track of a 13-year-old girl? Where would Dunn take her? As the interrogation continued, Miss Laney felt her phone vibrate. A text from the neighbor with the security cameras. Found more footage. Shows back of house too. Can you come? I have to go, she whispered to Detective Morgan, showing her the message. I'll send an officer with you. 20 minutes later, Miss Laney and Officer Chen were watching additional security footage in the neighbor's living room. The camera positioned toward the back of the Blue House had captured something the front camera missed. A third man, waiting behind the house during the incident. There, the neighbor pointed. He comes around from the side yard after the others drive away with the girl. The grainy image showed a heavy-set man entering through the back door. 5 minutes later, he emerged carrying what looked like a metal box. Can you enhance this? Officer Chen asked. The neighbors zoomed in as much as the footage allowed. The box appeared to be a small safe or lockbox. What was in there? Miss Laney wondered aloud. And why was it important enough to send a separate person to retrieve it? Officer Chen was already on the phone to Detective Morgan, relaying the new information. Miss Laney thanked the neighbor and stepped outside to clear her head. The blue house stood silent across the street, yellow police tape still fluttering in the breeze. What secrets did it hold? What had Willow been trying to protect? Her phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Miss Laney, this is Dr. Bennett from the hospital. Something's happened with Nora. Her heart raced. Is she okay? Physically, yes, but she had some kind of panic attack during a standard procedure. She's asking for you. I'll be right there. At the hospital, Miss Laney found Nora curled into a corner of her bed, eyes wide and frightened. There you are, Dr. Bennett said with relief. She's been like this for an hour. Won't let anyone touch her. Nora, Miss Laney approached slowly. It's me. What happened, sweetheart? The little girl's eyes focused on her. The man came, she whispered. Miss Laney felt a chill. What man? The one who was at our house, with the loud boots. He was here. I saw him in the hallway. Dr. Bennett frowned. We did have a maintenance worker on the floor earlier. What did he look like, Nora? Miss Laney asked urgently. Big, with a red hat and angry eyes. Her voice trembled. He's one of the men who took Willow. Miss Laney exchanged alarmed glances with Dr. Bennett, who immediately stepped out to alert security. You're safe now, Miss Laney assured Nora, sitting beside her on the bed. No one's going to hurt you. Nora's small hand found hers. He was looking for the box, she whispered. The special box where Willow keeps the important things. What? Important things? The papers and the pictures. Nora's eyes welled with tears. Willow said if anything bad ever happened to us, I should find the papers in the box and take them to a police officer. Miss Laney's mind raced. Do you know where this box is now? Nora shook her head. Willow hid. Didn't she said only she knows where. Security footage from the hospital confirmed a maintenance worker matching the description of the third man from the neighbor's video had indeed been on Nora's floor, claiming to fix a leak. He'd left before anyone could question him. That evening, Detective Morgan called an emergency meeting. Miss Laney left Nora sleeping under the watchful eye of an officer posted outside her door. The plot thickens, Detective Morgan said grimly when everyone had assembled. We've identified the third man as Roy Chambers, another debt collector connected to a loan. Shark named Victor Mercer, and we found Dunn, the second man from the original footage. And Willow? Miss Laney asked hopefully. The detective's expression darkened. Dunn claims he dropped her off near a park after questioning her, but we have no confirmation. However, we did find this in his apartment. She held up an evidence bag containing 2 small blue beads, the exact shade missing from Nora's bracelet. Those are Willow's, Miss Laney breathed. There's more, Detective Morgan continued. We've uncovered financial records showing Pamela Norris took out multiple high-interest loans for Mercer over the past year. The total debt is over $50,000. What would she need that kind of money for? Miss Laney wondered. We don't know yet, but we have a theory forming about why these men are so interested in finding this lockbox Nora mentioned. It might contain evidence of something beyond simple debt collection. As the meeting concluded, Miss Laney felt a strange mix of hope and dread. They were getting closer to answers, but Willow was still missing. Back in her car, she sat for a moment, overwhelmed by the day's revelations. The image of those 2 blue beads in the evidence bag kept appearing in her mind, tiny fragments of a connection between 2 sisters torn apart. Where are you, Willow? She whispered into the darkness. And what were you trying to protect? In the silence of her car, no answer came. But somewhere in the night, she felt certain a 13-year-old girl was wondering if anyone was looking for her at all. Miss Laney started her engine with renewed determination. Someone was indeed looking, and they wouldn't stop until Willow was found. Morning sunlight painted Nora's hospital room in warm golden hues as Miss Laney arrived. with a canvas tote bag full of books, art supplies, and a small surprise wrapped in tissue paper. "Good morning, sunshine," she greeted, finding Nora already awake and watching cartoons. The little girl's face lit up. "Miss Laney, you brought your magic bag." Over the past few days, this had their routine, Miss Laney bringing activities to brighten Nora's days in the hospital. The doctors were amazed at the child's physical progress, attributing much of it to her improved spirits. "I thought we could do something special today," Miss Laney said, unpacking the bag. "How about we make our own storybook?" Nora clapped her hands excitedly. "Can it be about a brave princess who goes on adventures?" "Absolutely. Any princess in particular?" "Princess Willow," Nora said confidently, "and her loyal knight who helps find lost treasures." Miss Laney's heart warmed at the thinly veiled parallel to their own situation. That sounds perfect. As they crafted their story page by page, Nora became increasingly animated, describing Princess Willow's courage and cleverness with admiration shining in her eyes. "Princess Willow always knows where the hidden paths are," Nora explained as she carefully colored a maze on their storybook page. "She leaves special marks so nobody gets lost." "Like what kind of marks?" Miss Laney asked, her teacher's instinct recognizing a potential clue. "Like this." Nora drew a small symbol that looked like a star with a circle around it. "It means safe place. And this one," she drew another mark, "means danger, go back." Miss Laney studied the symbols. "Did your sister teach you these?" Nora nodded. "It's our secret code. We practiced in case we ever got separated." A nurse arrived with Nora's lunch tray, temporarily interrupting their conversation. As they ate together, Miss Laney noticed how much more relaxed Nora had become, no longer flinching at sudden noises or checking her food with suspicion. "Dr. Bennett says you might be able to leave the hospital soon," Miss Laney mentioned casually, though the thought filled her with both joy and anxiety. Where would Nora go? Foster care seemed inevitable without family to claim her. "Where will I go?" Nora asked, echoing her thoughts with uncanny precision. "Well, Ms. Rivera is looking into the best place for you until we find Willow." Nora set down her spoon, suddenly. "Serious? Can I stay with you?" The question, so direct and hopeful, caught Miss Laney off guard. "Oh, sweetheart, there are rules about these things. It's complicated." "But you take care of me already," Nora reasoned with a child's simple logic. "And you're helping find Willow. She would want me to stay with you." Unable to find the right words, Miss Laney instead pulled out the tissue-wrapped package. "I brought you something special." Nora carefully unwrapped it to reveal a friendship bracelet, handmade with threads in purples and greens, and 2 blue beads identical to the ones missing from her own bracelet. "The beads aren't the same ones," Miss Laney explained gently, "but they reminded me of yours. I thought maybe we could be connected too, while we wait for Willow." Nora's eyes filled with tears as she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, alongside her original one. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Without warning, she launched herself forward, wrapping her thin arms around Miss Laney's neck. "Thank you, Mama." The word hung in the air between them. Nora froze, pulling back with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean—" "It's okay," Miss Laney assured her, though her own heart was racing. "You don't need to be sorry." The moment was interrupted by Dr. Bennett arriving for afternoon rounds. He smiled at the art supplies scattered across the bed. "I see we've been busy creating masterpieces." After checking Nora's vitals and examining her progress, he gestured for Miss Laney to step outside. "Physically, she's doing remarkably well," he said once they were in the hallway. "The real concern now is her emotional well-being. Has there been any progress finding her sister?" "Some leads, but nothing concrete yet," Miss Laney admitted. "What happens when she's cleared for discharge?" "That's what I wanted to discuss. Without a family member to take custody, she'll be placed in emergency foster care. Given her trauma history, that transition could be difficult." Miss Laney bit her lip, thinking of Nora's hopeful question about staying with her. What if there was another option? Before Dr. Bennett could respond, Miss Laney's phone rang. Detective Morgan. "We've got something," the detective said without preamble. "Dunn cracked. Says he took Willow to an abandoned property owned by Mercer after questioning her. Claims he left her there under the watch of another associate, but wasn't part of any plan to harm her. Do you believe him? We're verifying the location now. I'll text you the address. We're assembling a team to check it out." "I'll meet you there," Miss Laney said immediately. "Absolutely not. This is police business. Detective, I know more about these girls than anyone. What if Willow is frightened and won't trust officers she doesn't know? I could help." A long pause, then a reluctant sigh. "Meet me at the station first, and you stay in the car until we clear the scene." "Understood?" After hanging up, Miss Laney turned to find Nora standing in the doorway of her room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "You're going to find Willow?" she asked, hope and fear mingling in her voice. Miss Laney knelt to her level. "The police have a new clue about where she might be. I'm going to help them look." Nora pulled something from her rabbit's ear, a folded piece of paper. "Give her this," she said solemnly. "It's our map." Miss Laney unfolded it to find a child's drawing of what appeared to be a building with strange symbols throughout, the same symbols Nora had shown her in their storybook. "Willow will understand it," Nora explained. "It shows all our special places." Miss Laney carefully tucked the paper into her pocket. "I'll make sure she gets it." Before leaving, she called Ms. Rivera to stay with Nora, then headed for the bathroom to compose herself. The sighing weight of responsibility, to Nora, to Willow, to the promise she'd made to help them, felt suddenly overwhelming. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she noticed the dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights researching and worrying. The woman looking back at her was different from the teacher who had simply been walking home in the rain a week ago. "Mama," Nora had called her. The word echoed in her mind, awakening something she hadn't known was sleeping within her. Miss Laney splashed cold water on her face, steadying her resolve. Whatever happened next, she knew with absolute certainty that her life had changed irrevocably the moment she'd found a frightened little girl in that rainy alley. And she wouldn't have it any other way. The abandoned property was a disappointment. Police officers combed through the dilapidated structure, once a small office building on the outskirts of town, but found no sign of Willow. A sleeping bag and food wrappers indicated someone had been there recently, but whoever it was had vanished. "Dunn lied to us," Detective Morgan concluded grimly as she joined Miss Laney in her car. "Or whoever was supposed to be watching Willow moved her when they realized Dunn had been arrested." Miss Laney stared at the building, its broken windows like empty eyes. "At least we know she was alive when she was brought here. That's something, right?" The detective nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "We've put out an alert for Victor Mercer. His operation isn't just about debt collection. We've connected him to several instances of document fraud and identity theft. We think Pamela Norris might have been working for him, using the girls as cover for her criminal activities," Miss Laney said, the pieces starting to fit together. "Exactly. And there's more." Detective Morgan hesitated. "We found records indicating Pamela, or whatever her real name is, had custody of 2 other children before Nora and Willow. Their files are mysteriously incomplete, and we can't locate them in the system." A chill ran down Miss Laney's spine. "What happened to them?" "That's what worries me. There's no trace of them anywhere." The drive back to the police station was silent, both women lost in their own thoughts. Outside the station, Detective Morgan paused before getting out. "You should go home and get some rest. You look exhausted. I promised Nora I'd come back with news. Then tell her we're still looking, because we are." The detective's professional facade cracked slightly. "We'll find her, Miss Laney. We have to." At the hospital, Miss Laney found Nora sitting with Ms. Rivera, working on a puzzle. The little girl looked up expectantly as she entered. "Did you find her?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Miss Laney knelt beside her chair. Not yet, sweetheart. But we found a place where she might have been, and that gives us new clues to follow. Disappointment clouded Nora's face, but she nodded bravely. Willow is really good at hiding. She always wins at hide and seek. Did you give her the map? Ms. Rivera asked quietly. Miss Laney nodded, pulling out the folded paper. I kept it safe, but we didn't find Willow to give it to yet. Nora took the drawing back, studying it with intense focus. You. We're at the wrong place, she said suddenly. What do you mean? The child pointed to a structure on her map. This isn't the office building. This is the music box place. Miss Laney looked closer at the childish drawing. What she'd assumed was a random building did have a distinctive shape, like a warehouse with a curved roof. The music box place, she repeated. Is that where you heard the jingle you told me about? The one that played on TV? Nora nodded emphatically. The big toy store that closed. Willow said if we ever got separated and couldn't go home, I should look for her there. Miss Laney exchanged glances with Ms. Rivera. Do you know what she's talking about? Could be the old Wonderland Toy Emporium, Ms. Rivera suggested. It went bankrupt a few years ago. The building's been vacant since. New hope surged through Miss Laney. Nora, this is very important. Is there anything special about this place that would make Willow go there? The little girl traced a symbol on her map, the star with a circle that meant safe place. It's where the secret door is, she whispered, under the stairs where nobody can find you. Miss Laney was already reaching for her phone to call Detective Morgan when the hospital room door burst open. The school principal, Mr. Hadley, stood there with a stern expression. Miss Laney, I need to speak with you immediately. In the hallway, his disapproval was palpable. You've missed over a week of classes without proper documentation. The school board is questioning your commitment to your students. I had to take emergency leave. For a child who isn't your family, or even your student, he interrupted. While I sympathize with your compassion, we've had to hire a substitute at considerable expense. If you don't return to your duties by Monday, I'll have no choice but to recommend termination. The ultimatum hit her like a physical blow. Her job, her career, balanced against her promise to Nora. I understand, she said quietly. As Mr. Hadley left, Miss Laney leaned against the wall, suddenly overwhelmed. She hadn't considered the professional consequences of her involvement, but now they loomed large. Inside the room, Nora was watching the door with anxious eyes, her small hands clutching her rabbit tightly. Are you in trouble because of me? She asked in a small voice. Miss Laney summoned a reassuring smile. Nothing for you to worry about. But as she dialed Detective Morgan to tell her about the toy store, she couldn't help wondering what Monday would bring, and whether she'd be making the most difficult choice of her career. Miss Laney sat alone on her apartment balcony that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Detective Morgan had promised to check out the abandoned toy store first thing in the morning, insisting that Miss Laney go home and rest in the meantime. Rest, however, proved elusive. Her mind kept cycling between worry for Willow, concern for Nora, and anxiety about her job situation. The principal's ultimatum hung over her like a storm cloud: return to work Monday or face termination. 13 years of dedicated teaching, a career she'd built with passion and purpose. Could she really risk losing it all? She sipped her tea, now grown cold, and gazed at the framed photograph she'd brought outside with her. A picture of herself at age 12 with her younger sister Emma. They were standing in front of a carnival ride, arms around each other's shoulders, gap-toothed smiles beaming at the camera. It was the last photo they'd taken together before the system separated them. Different foster homes, different schools, different lives. By the time Miss Laney aged out of the system and had the resources to search for Emma, the trail had gone cold. 15 years of searching had yielded nothing but dead ends and faded hopes. Is that why I can't let this go? She whispered to the darkening sky. Am I trying to save Willow because I couldn't save Emma? The parallel wasn't lost on her. Two sisters separated by circumstances beyond their control. But unlike her own story, this one still had a chance for a different ending. Her phone chimed with a text from the hospital night nurse. Nora asking for you, nightmare. Calmer now but requesting bedtime story via phone if possible. Without hesitation, Miss Laney dialed the hospital room number. Miss Laney? Nora's small voice came through, thick with recent tears. I'm here, sweetheart. I heard you had a scary dream. The men with the loud boots were chasing me and Willow, Nora explained, her voice quavering. We were running and running but couldn't find the safe place. It was just a dream, Miss Laney soothed. You're safe in the hospital and we're going to find Willow tomorrow. Promise? The simple question carried such weight. I promise we're doing everything possible, she answered carefully. Can you tell me a story? A happy one? Miss Laney smiled into the phone. Of course. Once upon a time, there were two brave sisters who loved each other very much. She wove a tale of adventure and courage, where cleverness and kindness overcame all obstacles. By the end, Nora's breathing had slowed into the rhythm of sleep. Good night, little one, Miss Laney whispered before hanging up. The call left her with a profound sense of clarity. Setting down her cold tea, she went inside to her desk and pulled out an old leather-bound journal. It had been a gift from her first mentor teacher, inscribed with words that had guided her career. Teaching isn't just about lessons and tests. It's about changing lives when the opportunity arises. She opened to a blank page and began to write, pouring out her thoughts and feelings about Nora and Willow, about her own past, about the crossroads she now faced. The words flowed until she filled 3 pages, ending with a question. What kind of teacher? What kind of person do I want to be? The answer came with surprising certainty. If choosing between her job and keeping her promise to Nora meant losing her position, then perhaps it wasn't the right position for her after all. Some commitments transcended professional obligations. With newfound resolve, she pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. Questions for Detective Morgan about the toy store, ideas for helping Nora transition from the hospital, research on temporary guardianship requirements. As midnight approached, she finally felt tired enough to sleep. Before turning in, she took one last look at the photograph of herself and Emma. I couldn't find you, she whispered to her sister's smiling face. But I can find Willow. I can make sure these sisters don't lose each other like we did. The first light of dawn found Miss Laney already awake, dressed and ready. She'd made her decision. Monday's ultimatum no longer held power over her. Today was about finding Willow, whatever that took. She picked up Nora's map from her nightstand, studying the childish drawings and symbols. The safe place marker under the stairs in the toy store building seemed to be drawn with particular emphasis, pressed hard enough that the crayon had left an impression on the paper. Hold on, Willow, she murmured as she gathered her keys and phone. We're coming for you today. The toy store awaited, and with it, perhaps, the answers they'd been seeking. Miss Laney felt a strange mix of dread and hope as she headed for her car. Dread for what they might find. Hope that today would finally reunite two sisters who, like her and Emma, deserved the chance to grow up together. Some broken things could still be mended. Some lost things could still be found. Miss Laney arrived at the hospital early that morning to find Nora already dressed and sitting expectantly on the edge of her bed. You're coming with us to look for Willow today, Detective Morgan explained as Miss Laney entered. I've cleared it with Dr. Bennett. Sometimes children notice things adults miss, and Nora knows this place better than we do. The little girl's face shone with purpose. I can help find my sister. Just for a little while, the detective clarified. Officer Chen will bring you back to the hospital afterward. As they drove toward the abandoned toy store, Nora became increasingly animated, pointing out landmarks she recognized and clutching her map tightly. There it is, she exclaimed as they rounded a corner. The Wonderland Toy Emporium stood against the morning sky like a sleeping giant. Once the pride of the community, the massive building now wore a neglected, Air, windows boarded up, colorful signs faded, the parking lot cracked with sprouting weeds. Still, the distinctive curved roof and whimsical architecture made it instantly recognizable. "We came here before it closed," Nora explained as they parked. "They had the biggest dollhouse I ever saw and, train you could ride." Detective Morgan's team had already secured the perimeter. "No signs of recent entry that we can see," she reported. "But there are multiple possible access points." Miss Laney helped Nora from the car, noticing how the child's eyes darted everywhere, taking in details. "The special door isn't out here," she said confidently. "It's inside under the stairs where the music plays." They entered through what had once been the main entrance, flashlight beams cutting through the dusty gloom. The vast interior echoed with their footsteps, empty shelves and display cases, creating eerie shadows. "It looks so different," Nora whispered, pressing closer to Miss Laney. "Buildings change when they're empty," Miss Laney explained gently. "But the important parts are still here. Can you help us find the stairs you mentioned?" Nora nodded, consulting her map with serious concentration. "This way," she decided, pointing toward the back of the store. They followed her through the cavernous space, past toppled mannequins and faded murals of cartoon characters. In the center of the main floor stood a grand staircase that curved elegantly to the second level. "Not that one," Nora said when Detective Morgan started toward it. "The hidden one where employees go." She led them confidently to a door marked "Staff Only" near the back of the building. Beyond it lay a utilitarian hallway with plain concrete stairs leading both up and down. "Down," Nora directed, "to where they kept the extra toys." The basement level was cooler and darker, lined with storage rooms and what had once been offices. Water damage had warped some of the doors, and the smell of mildew hung in the air. "The music played down here," Nora said, her voice echoing slightly, "when new toys came in." As if triggered by her words, a tinny sound suddenly floated through the air, the faint notes of a cheerful jingle. Everyone froze. "That's it," Nora gasped. "The music box." Detective Morgan motioned for silence, signaling her officers to spread out and locate the source. The melody continued, a ghostly remnant of the building's happier days. "It's coming from over there," Miss Laney whispered, pointing toward a narrow corridor. They followed the sound to a small alcove beneath another stairwell. The music grew louder as they approached, then abruptly stopped. Nora tugged at Miss Laney's hand. "Knock 3 times," she whispered urgently. "That's the signal." Detective Morgan nodded her permission. Heart racing, Miss Laney approached the wall beneath the stairs and knocked 3 distinct times. Silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Then, almost too quiet to hear 3 answering knocks from the other side. "Willow!" Nora cried, rushing forward before anyone could stop her. "Willow! It's me! Nora!" Detective Morgan's flashlight revealed what they hadn't noticed before, a small, almost invisible seam in the wall. "There's a hidden door here," she said, running her fingers along the edge. "Some kind of panic room or storage space." Officers quickly located the mechanism, disguised as an electrical panel, and carefully opened the concealed door. Flashlight beams illuminated a small space beyond, and huddled in the corner, arms wrapped protectively. Around a metal lockbox was a thin figure with tangled hair. "Nora?" a trembling voice called out. "Is it really you?" Before anyone could react, Nora had slipped past them all and thrown herself into her sister's arms. "I knew you'd find me," Willow whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. "I knew you'd remember our special place." Miss Laney watched through tears of her own as the sisters clung to each other, their matching bracelets, one whole, one broken, pressed together like pieces of a puzzle finally rejoined. The music box that had guided them lay nearby, its mechanism triggered by their approach, a final gift from a once magical place that had, against all odds, provided sanctuary when it was needed most. The reunion was brief but powerful. After those first emotional moments, Detective Morgan gently separated the sisters, needing to ensure Willow received immediate medical attention. The 13-year-old was dehydrated and exhausted, having hidden in the secret room for days with minimal food and water. "How did you survive in here?" Miss Laney asked as paramedics checked Willow's vital signs. "I knew this place from before," Willow explained, her voice hoarse but determined. "Pam used to bring us here when she met with people. I discovered this room once when I was exploring. The employees used it to hide expensive merchandise." She kept the metal lockbox clutched tightly to her chest, refusing to let anyone take it. "What's, in the box, Willow?" Detective Morgan asked gently. The girl's eyes, so similar to Nora's but harder, more wary, darted between the adults. "Insurance," she said finally, "in case anything happened to us. Those men who came to the house, they were looking for this box, weren't they?" Miss Laney guessed. Willow nodded. "Pam kept records of everything. Names, dates, transactions. She said it was protection, but I think it was blackmail." Detective Morgan crouched to Willow's level. "We need to see what's in that box. It could help us understand what happened and make sure you and your sister stay safe." After a long moment, Willow's grip on the box loosened. "Only if Nora stays with me. And Miss Laney, too," she added, surprising everyone. "Nora trusts her, so I trust her." The contents of the lockbox proved more valuable than anyone could have imagined. Detailed records of Pamela, Norris's involvement with Victor Mercer's operation, including evidence of identity theft, fraud, and the exploitation of vulnerable children to maintain cover stories. Most disturbing were files on 2 previous children who had been under Pam's care before being handed off to other members of the EU network. "This is enough to bring down Mercer's entire operation," Detective Morgan said quietly to Miss Laney as forensic technicians cataloged the evidence. "Willow didn't just save herself and Nora. She may have saved other children too." The sisters sat together on a paramedic's tailgate, wrapped in emergency blankets, refusing to be separated even for a moment. Nora chattered excitedly, showing Willow her friendship bracelet from Miss Laney. Willow listened with a tired smile, occasionally glancing at Miss Laney with cautious curiosity. "She talks about you all the time," Willow said when Miss Laney approached. "Says you're like the mom in her storybooks." Miss Laney felt her cheeks warm. "I just wanted to help." "People don't usually help without wanting something back," Willow replied, wisdom beyond her years in her tone. "Sometimes they do," Miss Laney said gently. "Sometimes they help because it's the right thing to do." Willow studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. "Thank you," she said finally, "for taking care of my sister when I couldn't." As the girls were loaded into an ambulance to return to the hospital, Miss Laney felt her phone vibrate. The school principal again. Monday's ultimatum loomed larger than ever, but somehow it had lost its power to frighten her. Some choices, once made, simply felt right, whatever the consequences might be. The hospital bustled with activity as doctors examined Willow thoroughly. Despite her ordeal, she was in relatively good condition, dehydrated and hungry, but without serious injuries. The sisters refused to be placed in separate rooms, so the staff arranged for a second bed to be brought into Nora's room. Miss Laney sat in the hallway outside, completing paperwork with Ms. Rivera. The social worker had been making calls all afternoon, trying to determine the best placement for the girls. "The system is overwhelmed as usual," Ms. Rivera admitted with a sigh. "Finding a foster home willing to take 2 children, especially with their history of trauma, won't be easy." "They can't be separated," Miss Laney said firmly. "Not after everything they've been through." "I agree, but I can't promise anything. The emergency placement might only be temporary." Miss Laney stared at the form in her hands, a visitor authorization she'd been completing when a different idea began taking shape in her mind. "What about temporary guardianship? How difficult is that process?" Ms. Rivera looked up, surprised. "Are you thinking of applying? It's not simple. There are home studies, background checks, interviews, financial reviews." "But it's possible?" "Yes, though it could take weeks to process. The girls would still need emergency placement in the meantime. Miss Laney nodded thoughtfully, a plan forming. Before she could elaborate, Detective Morgan arrived with news. "We've arrested Victor Mercer and 3 more of his associates," she reported. "The evidence from Willow's lockbox was exactly what we needed, but there's still no sign of Pamela Norris. She seems to have vanished completely." "Do you think she'll come back? Try to find the girls?" Miss Laney asked, worry creeping into her voice. "It's unlikely. Based on the records, she was planning to abandon them anyway once they were no longer useful to her operation. But we'll maintain protection until we're certain." Inside the room, Willow was sitting up in bed while Nora showed her the stuffed rabbit and the storybook they'd created together. Despite her ordeal, the teenager's face had softened as she listened to her sister's excited chatter. "Willow has been asking for you," Detective Morgan told Miss Laney. "Says she has questions only you can answer." Entering the room, Miss Laney found herself under the scrutiny of Willow's intelligent, assessing gaze. "Nora says you want to help us." The teenager began without preamble. "Why?" The directness of the question took Miss Laney aback. "Because everyone deserves someone in their corner," she answered honestly. "Especially children who've been let down by the adults who should have protected them." "Are you going to be our new foster parent or something?" Willow pressed, skepticism evident in her tone. "I don't know what's going to happen next," Miss Laney admitted, "but I do know I'm not walking away from either of you." Willow seemed to consider this, absently touching the friendship bracelet on her wrist. Nora had returned. The missing blue beads, carefully reattached by a kind nurse. "Nora needs stability," Willow said finally. "Someone who won't disappear. She's had enough of that already." "So have you," Miss Laney pointed out gently. Something vulnerable flickered across Willow's face before the teenager could mask it. "I'm used to taking care of myself." "You shouldn't have to be. You're 13. You deserve a childhood too." Before Willow could respond, Dr. Bennett entered with test results confirming both girls were on the road to recovery. "Willow can be discharged tomorrow," he announced. "Nora?" "Likely the day after." The question hung unspoken in the air. Discharged to where? As evening approached, Miss Laney found herself at a crossroads. Monday's ultimatum from the principal demanded an answer. The sisters' uncertain future required a decision. Everything seemed to be converging at once, demanding courage and clarity. Standing in the hospital corridor, watching through the window as the sisters shared a meal together, safe, at least for now, Miss Laney made her choice. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number that would set in motion events that would change not just the girls' lives, but her own. Sometimes the hardest paths led to the most beautiful destinations. Chapter 14. Reunion and Recovery. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the hospital windows as Willow packed her few belongings into a small bag provided by the social services department. Nora sat cross-legged on her bed, watching her sister with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Where will we go?" she asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit close. "Ms. Rivera found us a place to stay together," Willow answered, trying to sound confident despite her own uncertainty. "That's what matters most." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Miss Laney entered, carrying 2 shopping bags and wearing a smile that seemed both nervous and hopeful. "Good morning, girls. I brought you some clothes and a few other things you might need." Willow accepted the bag cautiously. "Thank you. We heard you're not coming with us to the foster home." "Actually," Miss Laney took a deep breath, "that's what I wanted to talk to you about. There's been a change of plans." She sat on the edge of Nora's bed, choosing her words carefully. "I've applied to become your temporary guardian while the courts figure out a permanent situation for you both." Nora's eyes widened. "We'd live with you. If that's something you'd want," Miss Laney clarified quickly. "It's your choice, and it would take time to approve. There are many steps in the process, but Ms. Rivera has helped arrange for an emergency placement with me in the meantime, since I've already passed background checks for teaching." Willow's expression remained guarded. "What about your job?" Nora mentioned your boss was upset. Miss Laney smiled wryly. Let's just say I made a choice about what matters most to me. I've taken a leave of absence for the remainder of the school year. My assistant principal was very understanding once I explained the situation. You'd do that for us? Willow asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Give up your job? Not giving up. Just pressing pause. Some things are worth, rearranging your life for. The teenager studied her face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. Finding none, her shoulders relaxed slightly. What if we're too much trouble? What if you change your mind? I won't, Miss Laney promised. This isn't a decision I made lightly, Willow. I understand the responsibility I'm taking on, and I'm committed to seeing it through, for however long you need me. Nora had already scrambled across the bed to throw her arms around Miss Laney's neck. Can we go home now? You're home? Dr. Bennett needs to discharge you first, Miss Laney laughed, returning the hug. But yes, we can go to my apartment afterward. I've been getting it ready for you both. She looked over Nora's head at Willow, whose expression remained cautious, but had softened noticeably. What do you think, Willow? Would you be willing to give this arrangement a try? Teenager's hand went to her bracelet, touching the blue beads that connected her to her sister. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. For Nora's sake, she said, but the slight tremor in her voice suggested it might be for her own sake too. The discharge process took several hours, filled with paperwork, instructions, and final checkups. Detective Morgan stopped by with an update on the case. Mercer and his associates remained in custody, and the search for Pamela Norris continued, though they now believed she had fled the country. You'll have an officer checking in regularly until we're certain there's no threat, the detective assured them. But the evidence suggests the girls were simply collateral damage in a much larger scheme. Now that we have Mercer's operation shut down, they're no longer in immediate danger. As they finally prepared to leave, Dr. Bennett pulled Miss Laney aside. What you're doing for these children is remarkable, he said. Not many would open their homes and hearts so completely to strangers. They're not strangers anymore, Miss Laney replied simply. Outside the hospital, the afternoon sunshine felt like a blessing. Nora skipped ahead to the parking lot, pointing excitedly at butterflies and clouds, while Willow walked more sedately beside Miss Laney. I've been taking care of Nora since I was 9, the teenager said suddenly. After Mom died and Pam took us in. I'm not sure I know how to stop being responsible for her. You don't have to stop, Miss Laney assured her. You'll always be her big sister. But maybe now you can share some of that responsibility with me and have a chance to just be a kid sometimes too. Willow considered this, watching Nora's carefree movements ahead of them. I'd like that, she admitted. Quietly. To just be a kid sometimes. As they reached Miss Laney's car, Nora turned back, sunshine illuminating her smile. Are we going home now? She called. Home. The word hung in the air, full of promise and possibility. Yes, Miss Laney answered, her heart full. We're going home. 3 months later, Miss Laney's classroom buzzed with end-of-year excitement. Students cleaned out desks and collected artwork from the walls, while parents chatted in small groups, admiring the displays of their children's accomplishments. In the back of the room, Nora carefully arranged cookies on a tray, her tongue poking out in concentration. She wore a bright yellow dress and new shoes that she'd picked out herself, her once thin frame now filled out with healthy roundness. Is this enough cookies, Miss Laney? She called across the room. Perfect, Miss Laney smiled, still touched by how Nora switched between calling her Miss Laney at school and Mom at home, a transition that had happened naturally over the weeks they'd lived together. The temporary guardianship had evolved into a formal adoption application that was moving smoothly through the system. Their apartment, once a quiet space for one, now hummed with the energy of family life. Backpacks in the hallway, drawings on the refrigerator, movie nights with popcorn battles. Willow entered the classroom carrying a stack of paper cups. her long hair pulled back in a neat braid. At 13, she'd been hesitant to join the elementary school's final celebration, insisting she was too old for that baby stuff. But when Nora had asked for her help, she couldn't refuse. "Mrs. Peterson says we can use the big cooler for lemonade," Willow reported, setting down the cups. The transformation in the teenager had been more subtle than Nora's, but no less profound. Weekly therapy sessions had helped her begin processing years of responsibility and fear. She'd joined a youth orchestra, rediscovering a love of music that had been buried under survival concerns. There were still difficult days and trust issues to work through, but progress came in small, steady steps. As the celebration wound down and families began to leave, Miss Laney found a moment to gaze at her newly formed family with wonder. 6 months ago, she'd been a dedicated teacher with a predictable life. Now she was something more, still a teacher but also a guardian, a protector, a mother in all the ways that mattered. The school year was ending, but their story together was just beginning. Later that evening, as she tucked Nora into bed, the little girl held her hand tightly. "I figured it out," Nora whispered, her eyes serious. In the soft lamplight, "Figured what out, sweetheart? Why everything happened the way it did." Nora traced the friendship bracelet she still wore alongside Miss Laney's matching one. "Why Pam disappeared and why I got lost in the rain." Miss Laney waited, sensing the importance of whatever revelation the child had reached. Nora smiled, wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. "She had to disappear so you could find me, so all three of us could be a family." The simple statement, delivered with a child's certainty, filled Miss Laney's heart to overflowing. From the doorway came a soft sound. Willow, listening, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I think you might be right," Miss Laney whispered, pressing a kiss to Nora's forehead. In her classroom the next day, the last of the school year, Miss Laney hung a new poster above her desk. It featured a simple quote that had become her family's unofficial motto: "You were someone's answer." Because sometimes, in the most unexpected ways, people find exactly who they need and become exactly who someone else needs them to be. As Nora had said, with the wisdom of an open heart, sometimes things fall apart so better things can fall together. And for the teacher who followed her heart and the sisters who found their way home, those better things were just beginning.